Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth declined to give a timeline for the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran, saying it was up to President Donald Trump. Briefing the media in Virginia this afternoon, Hegseth said Trump had made extensive efforts with Tehran to enter into a negotiated agreement in the run-up to the start of the military operation on Saturday, but Iranian authorities declined. This after last year's Operation Midnight Hammer had devastated Iran's nuclear infrastructure, reducing key elements of its program to ruins.
Last June, Operation Midnight Hammer obliterated their nuclear program to rubble. Afterward, we told them plainly, that's it, now make a deal. They arrogantly refused. We said, rebuild it, and we'll stop you again, this time far worse. Well, President Trump, Secretary Rubio, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, they bent over backwards for real diplomacy, offering pathway after pathway to peace. I watched it. I was there. They tried over and over and over again earnest attempts at peace. The former regime had every chance to make a peaceful and sensible deal. But Tehran was not negotiating. They were stalling, buying time to reload their missile stockpiles and restart their nuclear ambitions. Their goal, hold us hostage, threatening to strike our forces. Well, President Trump doesn't play those games. And as Secretary Rubio said after the Maduro raid, if you don't know, now you know. President Trump puts America and Americans first. He doesn't hesitate, and neither.
All right, we'll stay with this particular story and speak to Dr. Evaleila Pesaran, fellow and senior college lecturer in politics and international relations at the University of Cambridge. A very good evening to you, Doc, and thank you so much for your time. So firstly, before we even get into what Iran's road ahead is likely to look like, you've just listened to the U.S. Secretary of Defense there speaking about the tense situation that had been unfolding to this particular moment. But when one looks back into the history, these two countries were not always foes. They were at some point friends, and then things began to change. And this is where we're finding ourselves right now.
Yes, that's right, quite right. So in the pre-revolutionary period, before 1979, Iran and the United States had a very close relationship. And I think it's partly because of that close relationship that they used to have, that friendship, that now it becomes that enmity becomes so sour.
And when you're looking at the current situation, there's a lot of concern. For example, the killing of the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, raising a lot of questions about the future of the country and whether or not there'll be stability and if the U.S. will be able to get its way of this regime change. So in your view, what Iran emerges post the passing of Khamenei?
It's a very important question to ask. It's a very difficult question to know for sure, but I think that there are good mechanisms in place within Iran to identify a replacement supreme leader. Already there are 3 individuals as a sort of a triumvirate who have been named to hold the reins for now until a new supreme leader can be identified. So Iran is not like Iraq, where everything was very personalized around the individual of Saddam Hussein. And when you get rid of the leader, the whole state comes crumbling. Iran is a different scenario altogether. And I think that there will be lots of opportunities for the regime to rebuild itself around new leadership.
And what does this rebuilding look like? Because as you speak about this 3-member interim council, a lot of people are saying, like you're saying, that the systems are quite tight. They will be able to have some kind of stability. But what does the rebuilding look like for a country that has had to deal with what it's had to deal with?
Indeed. So, I mean, Iran is a country in crisis on many levels. There's facing a legitimacy crisis after these past few weeks, months of widespread, violently repressed protests. It's in an economic crisis, which is largely why there were these protests in the first place. There's an environmental crisis in Iran, and now it's being battered by bombardments by Israel and the United States. So it's going to be very difficult to rebuild all of this infrastructure, to rebuild the military power of the country. But I think it's going to be done in a very repressive way to make sure that any opposition voices within the country are silenced, because now, of course, that sort of view is affirmed, that the regime has been holding, that opponents to the regime are lackeys of Western foreign powers. I think they can feel quite confident in articulating those assertions now, that they are being attacked, they are at war.
And Doc, when you're looking at the events since Saturday, right, what happens in Iran doesn't stay in Iran. We've seen the consequences are radiating across the region as well as the world. How are we going to see this impact, especially when it comes to what we're seeing in the Gulf right now, and how now everyone is on tenterhooks?
Yeah, I mean, it's really affecting the whole region. All of these Gulf states, they've been sort of havens of sort of just wealth and stability and affluence are being hit by Iranian missiles. And there's enormous tension. And as you see, we saw just before I came on, the spreading to Lebanon. And we also see tensions in places like Afghanistan, Pakistan, and in Kashmir as well, in relation to the killing of Ayatollah Khamenei on the part of Shiite Muslims. There's also obviously the impact on the global economy as a result of the difficulty to get oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. So it's certainly going to affect everybody, really.
Yeah, and the Strait of Hormuz in and itself is a story when you think about its significance. And I wonder then, you know, we listened to the Secretary of Defense in the U.S., Pete Hegseth, saying that the negotiations have been difficult. It doesn't seem like the two parties were finding each other. Different world leaders have got different views about what is currently taking place. We even heard from the UN Security Council the different voices there. They're firm but different. Is there still room right now, as we speak, with what is going on, to sit at the table and possibly find a solution to all of this?
Very sadly, I think it's really becoming like a minuscule opportunity and chance of that happening. Already, in a way, it's surprising that the Iranians were continuing negotiations with the United States when they were attacked in the 12-day war last year. And yet they were also engaging in talks while Trump was amassing, you know, a huge presence in the Persian Gulf. So they were negotiating under threat of invasion following a previous invasion. And now that we've reached where we are today, my understanding is that Iranian regime representatives are not willing to continue negotiations with the United States.
And certainly, it does look like it's going to be quite the next, few days are going to really be quite crucial as to what happens next. But Doc, appreciate your time. Thank you so much for talking to us. Dr. Evaleila Pesaran, Fellow and Senior College Lecturer in Politics as well as International Relations at the University of Cambridge, speaking to us about the developments in the Middle East.